Thank you for being here. My name is Mike Graglia. I'm the founder and CEO of Cure SYNGAP1. And luckily, I don't have to do a wrap-up session for today. We've run out of time. So we get to finish on a super strong note. I am honored to be sitting here, do a little fireside chat with Josh Mandel-Brehm, who is the CEO of CAMP4 Therapeutics, which you're about to hear a lot about. And it's just incredibly exciting. If you think about it, 4 years ago, I think we were huddled around, I don't even remember where we were because we follow AAS around the world every year, but this room gets bigger and bigger each year, and it gets more and more packed each year. And I promise you next year we will ask our sponsors, thank you for sponsoring by the way, for even more money, and we will get a bigger room because this is getting crazy. But this is a great way to end it, as if you don't know, you're about to figure it out. So let's jump right in because we're going to run out of time. Josh, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Could you talk a bit about yourself, why you're here, and CAMP4?
Yep. Thank you. Full transparency, I can't see anything, so I could just see Mike. First of all, thanks for inviting us here. It's a pleasure, a privilege, and you've heard the team said it better than I have, so we love being part of this community, and thanks for having us again. So Mike asked me to introduce myself. I'm going to do it extremely briefly here. So Josh Mandel-Brehm, I'm the CEO of CAMP4. I'm the maybe first person on this stage that doesn't have an MD or PhD or anything like that. So thank you, Mike. I get to clean up behind. Yeah, exactly. We're the closing act here. So great. I come from a family of scientists. My mother worked on Rett syndrome actually for a long time. My father worked on a lot of muscle diseases. My sister works on autoimmunity of the brain. I don't do any of that. So anybody who meets me, there's some people in here who know my parents and sister, they're very disappointed when they meet me. Sorry. My first job out of school was at Genzyme, which for those of you who know, probably many of you do, they're famous in the rare disease world amongst other things. And the last 20 or so years of my career, I've spent working on rare diseases, going from Genzyme to Biogen. And for the last close to 9 years, I've been at CAMP4 and been very excited about what we're doing.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about CAMP. I mean, we just heard from your chief science officer, right? Dan told us about CAMP4 and working on Syngap. Can you talk about a little bit why you guys are working on Syngap and where you're at, just in case someone in this room is unaware?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just mentioned I've been at the company for close to 9 years. In fact, many people at the company have been here a long time. So I think it's a testament to the fact that we believe in what we're doing. Platform companies tend to take a long time to figure out where their best applications are, and CAMP4 is no different than that. There's a long list of companies, Alnylam, Ionis, companies you guys have probably heard about, and we essentially figured out in the last 5 or 6 years that we can do two things really well. One is we can use our platform to really understand what's happening in the nucleus, and you've heard a lot about that today, in particular around Syngap, of why that's important. So that's something that we're able to do. But really the most important thing that I think we've discovered is that we could take advantage of these RNAs that come out of enhancers and promoters. We call them regulatory RNAs. Dan spoke about that. And we can use antisense oligonucleotides, which are a proven technology that is in drugs that are approved for diseases like Spinraza for spinal muscle atrophy, but are in hundreds of other clinical trials. And we can essentially open the aperture of how you use that chemistry to apply it to diseases like Syngap. And it took us a few years to figure out where the best place to use our technology was. We've learned that we are really good at upregulating things about twofold. That's our sweet spot. We don't tend to go more than that. And it turns out that haploinsufficient diseases are really prime for that. You don't necessarily want to overexpress in those cases. We also look at places where antisense oligonucleotides have been de-risked. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. The liver, drugs go to the liver. The CNS as well is an area where there's a bunch of oligo drugs that have been in the clinic and are on the market. And then lastly, there's many haploinsufficient diseases in the CNS. Many of those diseases are very bad diseases. Many of them have no approved treatments. Case in point is Syngap. That's a disease that when we learned about it, we felt compelled to really want to make a difference, and it felt like a really good application for our technology.
And you guys in, and you have named it as sort of the tip of the spear to prove your platform, right? I mean, the company is now moving almost into, this company has about 60 people last time I checked.
Yeah, I have some investors in the room. We have less than 60 people.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm bad with numbers. So it's a small, tight team who's working fast and focused, the majority of whom are focusing on Syngap. So, I mean, what you said is broadly true, right? There's a lot of haploinsufficiencies. We do not have a monopoly on misery. There's a lot of families out there who are suffering. At a certain point, you and your CFO have to look at investors and say, we're going to do Syngap. And investors are lovely human beings, but they ask hard questions. And so when they push you and say, why is this a good idea? Convince me you're not making a mistake with your money. Like, why, like specifically, why Syngap?
Yeah. I mean, just to put a finer point on it, and I'll answer your question, you know, we made a decision this year. I mean, we've been working on Syngap for a while. We went public last year, and Syngap was not the lead program at the time. That's not because we weren't incredibly excited and interested in Syngap. It was more just certain data sets were not yet generated there. So it was just too far away for anybody on the public side to care about at that time, quite frankly. It was just too early. We got certain results that I could talk about this more, but the bottom line is one of the nice things about oligos, for example, is that when you go after monogenic diseases and you tend to see the types of results we saw in the primates, those tend to translate favorably in the clinic. So that's an important concept. Anyway, amongst other things, we made a strategic decision to essentially pivot the entire company to revolve around Syngap. And that was a hard thing to do for a variety of reasons. We had another program that is, you know, we just read out on. We think it's great. We're going to try and put that in a partner's hands. But we felt compelled to really build the company around Syngap moving forward for some of the reasons I already said. I think what you're getting at, though, is a different question, which is, you know, fundraising is hard, to say the least. It's hard for foundations. It's hard for companies. It's hard in hard markets. And from a company perspective, we're in an environment where investors are picky, and really they're asset focused, and they want to know that they're investing in something that essentially is, well, first of all, investors want to do good as well. They want to help patients, but they want to invest in something where they think it's going to be meaningful on the other side. And so what does that actually mean? And this is where the patient foundation comes into play, and you guys should give yourselves a ton of credit. You can't just have an unmet need. That's a serious unmet need, to your point, Mike. Many diseases do. There's so many diseases we want to help, as do other companies. You have to make it important for people. And so how do you make it important for people? Well, you have to make sure that there's patients that can be identified. There's patients that can go into a clinical study. There's natural history studies are really important for rare diseases. Tools that we heard about today, mouse models, et cetera, things that are translatable. And quite frankly, you have to make it relevant so that the bigger companies care, right? It's been amazing to me how many companies have started paying attention to Syngap, and that has happened because of the work that's been done in here and all the researchers, doctors. But really, the foundation is such a critical role in it. I cannot tell you how hard it is to do what you're doing, but it really does matter because it helps pave a path forward for companies. It helps make it relevant for investors. It helps make it makes our job a little bit easier to do what we're supposed to do, which is help make drugs for you guys. So,
thanks. And before I ask you my next question, I want to, another follow-on question and something that de-risks Syngap radically, aside from a semi-functional patient advocacy group, is can you talk a little bit about all the partnership between CAMP and CHOP and Penn? Because I feel like that's been a real gift to both our community and the STX community.
Yeah, I mean, look, what I'll say is the work that is being done there is incredible. You know, I'll give a little bit of a shout out to some people, but it's not doing it justice. We've done work with Ben Prosser, and Ben's been incredible. I know that Ben, your name comes up all the time at CAMP4. So really, I mean, we were able to take advantage of that mouse model, and that really helped us do a lot of things. The natural history studies, the clinical discussions we've been having, the feedback we're discussing in terms of the patients, how to design studies. So it ranges from, of course, anywhere from tools that we're using to being thoughtful about How do we think about these patients? How do we think about a clinical trial? How do we work together? Things that CHOP and ENDD are already doing, but that they're allowing us to participate in and be collaborative in. And that's incredible, and we appreciate that, and we want to keep looking for ways to do more. But they did all the heavy lifting. We're just trying to do our part and participate in that.
No, they're great. And, you know, part of my job all the time is to make other companies in the room, hi, guys, remember that pardon me, I misspoke, that SYNGAP1 is right here waiting for more and more companies to work on it. So I wanted to call it all the good things. And I am so grateful that CAMP4 had the culture, the tenacity, the opportunism, I guess, to just say, there's an opportunity here, we have an asset, let's go. And I'm eternally grateful to the whole team for that, for the way you guys do business. And every time someone calls me and says, Yuri is asking for even more, I commiserate with them and I pretend to care, and deep down inside, I'm like, go Yuri, go. But having said that, families ask me all the time, why have we not started trials? So I have to ask you, like, are we moving fast enough? Like, I know that Yuri is out there racking up frequent flyer miles and pushing everybody, but can you please just convince me and the audience that CAMP4 is moving as fast as possible? Or is there anything we can do to move faster, and can we help?
Yeah. Yuri, do I ask that enough? You should keep asking that day in and day out. Like, it absolutely. Are we moving fast enough? I can tell you that truly at our company, we literally every week look at our Gantt charts, look at what's happening, take stock of what's happening at a regulatory agency or another, and ask that question of, okay, what can we remove to move quicker, right? Or how do we move more quickly? And I have two schools of thought on this. One is it's a relative term. So what does quickly mean? So one thing I think it's really important for people to understand is, to us, quickly means the ability to safely and effectively show that we can get a safe and effective drug to a market to get it broadly available for all the patients that have Syngap, right? That's the end game. So along those lines, we make decisions that might be frustrating for people in terms of which jurisdictions we start in or at what time point we start. Maybe there was a way we could have started something 1 or 2 months earlier, but it would have actually taken longer to get to the last patient data, for example, right? And so everything is a game of trade-offs, and so we balance that. So one set of things we think about is, okay, we want to get as quickly as possible to start treating patients. And by the way, when we start treating patients, we want to start at doses that we think are therapeutically relevant. That's really, really important, because every jurisdiction, regulatory agency thinks about that a bit differently. That's a really important concept to us. And there are examples of companies that unfortunately had to start at doses that were subtherapeutic, and it took them a long time to get to where they were. Had they started somewhere else, it might have been a bit different. So if you happen to be in a jurisdiction where you're like, hey, why aren't you starting here? I can completely understand why that's frustrating. But I hope that there's some trust in mind, which is we're doing it for a reason, which is to get to as quickly as possible clinical proof of concept, right? Which will allow us to more quickly get to that point where we can get that drug on the market. And so there's a trade-off there, but we keep asking the question, how can we move more quickly, and what are things we can change to essentially get there, which also, by the way, means we think about the way we develop a clinical study. We do it in a way where if there's a possibility of even doing things that allow for accelerated pass forward and whatnot, which, you know, you have to think about that today to set up for the future without knowing exactly what that future looks like.
It's an incredibly hard question, and I think you talked a bit about how different regulatory agencies will have different preferences, right? Some of them are going to be willing to let you go with a dose that we think will work, and some of them are going to be more focused on safety and are going to want to start you at a dose that's too low. And just to spell that out for the patients in the room, none of us want to take our kid. It's a lot of work to be in a trial, right? And none of us want to get our kids poked with a dose that we all know isn't going to make a difference, just so that regulators can feel comfortable. So this informs the sequencing, and I think something we should find ways to explain better to the community as to when this rolls out. So my understanding, please correct me, is right now we're in non-human primates. That's the last hurdle. Once we get that tox data, you can take a package to regulators. And if God is kind, we could start dosing humans as early as the second half of next year. But then that will be dependent on regulators.
Yeah, so just yes.
Okay, good, because I have follow-on questions. So
Do you want me to respond? You want to ask your
yeah, go. No, you're the CEO. Go for it.
I work for you. Really, I work for you. Trust me on that. You may not realize it, but I do.
I got something else, and then we're good. So keep going.
Go ahead.
So if that's accurate, then can you help? I'm really why I'm so grateful that we're doing this. I want the patients in the room and the researchers in the room to really appreciate the industry perspective and the cold, hard practicalities of getting this done, because everyone in our community suffers from incredible impatience, and we're just like, why the hell isn't this done yet? Not because you're not moving fast enough, but because we are suffering. And so we as a community have done a great job of organizing and educating each other. And as we heard today from our friends at CHOP, Dr. McKee and others, there are different phenotypes in the early exons. And then as we heard from some of the VUS research, there are missense mutations. And we have talked about in the community how these people are likely going to be not involved in the phase 1, 2, or phase 3 the first time around. So can you help us understand why that is, and then when they could hope to be involved in a trial or have access to drug?
Yep. Actually, I'm going to make one comment that might actually make you feel better as well about asking, can we go faster? I was at a dinner not too long ago with folks that had invested in CAMP4, and they were asking a similar question. Take us through, and I can share what I can share. And they said, so okay, you're doing your talks, and it's going to be done in Q1, give or take. Great. What's stopping you from getting in the clinic in April? I'm like, well, I started answering like, yeah, but why aren't you in the clinic in April? Like, can you get there faster? So if it makes you feel better, this is a good place of alignment where our shareholders, our investors want us to move quickly too. So like, they're asking the question too. Everybody's asking the question, which I'm glad they are. Like, we should constantly pressure test that. So a couple things. Regulatory agencies, each one has a slightly different way of doing things. We're already in discussions with them seeking advice as to, hey, this is our plan. What do you think? Can we move more quickly? How do we do this? One of the things that we also think about, which is really important, and it goes back to my original comment of, the end game is to get a drug that is safe and effective on the market as soon as possible. One of the things we think about when one of the biggest issues in drug development, in particular in the CNS, by the way, is situations where you design the wrong study. And unfortunately, if you design the wrong study, there is no greater misstep in drug development, because that is years and years of work being done and tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So you have to be extremely thoughtful of that. So like, what can cause that, right? Not powering a study the right way, having too much heterogeneity. Essentially, our job right now is to set up a study where, one, we show our drug is safe. Two, we're able to figure out the optimal dose that gives us an efficacious result in patients. And three, that we can show that. We're not having to squint at it. We're not having to look at it and say, well, we did a sub-analysis and these 3 patients over here. And so what that sometimes means is that we try and get a situation where we try and tighten the error bar around what the patients look like that are entering the study. Not because we don't want to help everybody, but for everybody's sake, though, we want to get to a clear answer, because that creates much more optionality for us on the back end.
So the first study will be down the middle syngapians, not early exons, unlikely missense, get through phase 1, 2, 3, and then we maybe do follow-on studies for these other subpopulations. Because what we didn't hear about in this meeting today, but I expect we'll be talking about, normally if I think something's going to happen in 2 years, CHOP does it the next year. So I'm just waiting for Dr. McKee to get up there and start explaining to us that she's defining the subtypes of SYNGAP1, because there are clearly different subpopulations here. That's exciting. Thank you. This stuff takes money, and you guys recently raised a good chunk of change, and we were very happy and grateful to be invited to participate in that. Could you talk a little bit about that fundraise and then why you decided to invite Cure SYNGAP1 to participate? Yep,
and I'm going to give another nod, if you don't mind, to just contextualize how important you guys have made this disease for people. As a public company, to be able to go and reposition the company and raise the capital we did around a preclinical story, and hard is probably an understatement. That only happens because our investors, one, they believe in our data, and there's a story there, but they believe that this disease is an important disease. And it has a path forward, right? Meaning we understand the biology enough that there's a strong patient advocacy group. So again, like, don't take that comment lightly. The work you've done is important for those reasons. I think, since we did our financing, I've seen more companies come out of the woodwork and say, we're working on SYNGAP2. Like, awesome. But I would tell you, and Mike knows this, when we were going through our fundraise, which we were doing over the summer, and we were talking to investors, I will tell you there's a decent amount of investors who said, how come I've never heard of this disease? And, we talked to them, we took them through it, but we always ended with, well, why don't you go call Mike Graglia, right? Why don't you talk to Mike? And why don't you call these other people as well? And many of the investors did, by the way. And so why does that matter, right? It doesn't matter for every disease, but it mattered here. And then take on top of that you guys were willing to put your money where your mouth is and say, we're going to put money in this too, actually. Not because CAMP4 is the only company we want to be aligned with, but because we believe in what CAMP4 is doing. And I think from an investor point of view, you're looking, because you ask questions. By the way, there are many diseases where they can't find the patients, they can't recruit, they're not sure. As you guys heard before, how long did it take to recruit for that study, right? So it's just another indication that essentially some of the risks that investors are worried about can be taken off the table. We're working with the organization. We're working closely with the KOLs. We're going to get this study going as quickly as possible. We're going to design it in a thoughtful way. If there's any opportunity to pull this thing forward, the foundations are what make that happen. And very rarely do you have the opportunity to do what you guys did. But when it does happen, I mean, you look at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, you look at SMA, you look at DMD, those foundations played a pivotal role in making these things happen, but also, it was for an investment point of view as well. So,
we were thrilled to get into that because, what I said to the board and what I'll say to anyone, because I've had a few patients come up to me and be like, why did we do that? Are we conflicted now? And I'm like, we're not conflicted. I will recruit anyone who's got a therapy that's safe and effective and they want to recruit Syngapians, I will tell the community about it, right? I'm not going to cherry pick. But the reason I was so excited to participate in that is I wanted the investment community to understand that this is an activated community, number one. And number two, years ago I was an MBA. Now I just run around and talk about Syngap. But your stock price made no sense, right? You had this beautiful data.
It still doesn't.
And your stock price was down here, and it was down there because people thought you were going to run out of cash. And then I was like, well, if we're part of the solution, this is kind of a no-brainer. And so I was really grateful that CAMP4 gave us the chance to both participate in this, because we need as much money as we can get to fund more research, right? Assuming those funds come back with extra, we will just turn around and invest that in more science and more clinical research. But also, it was a great way for us to send a signal to the investment community that this community is activated and ready. So I'm sincerely grateful that Caleb called me. He's like, I have another crazy idea. It's like every month. And I'm like, hit me, Caleb, let's do it. So really, really, really grateful and excited about this partnership. We're at time. I had planned on giving the audience time for questions, but I'm not going to. If you really want to, the team's right here, Caleb, right here. Just tackle him afterwards. But last question to you, and anything else you want to say. Aside from working closely together to get a safe and effective medicine for Syngapians, what's next for CAMP4 as you look forward? Are you able to look around the corner past Syngap, or is this the focus for a while?
This is by far and large the focus. There's a lot of wood left to chop. That we are nowhere near declaring victory. I mean, we've got money to do the studies. We have other gates to get through. The next one is we got to get this study started and get into patients, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So for a lot of reasons, we are laser focused on that. All that said, there are other DEEs, there are other diseases. There's one right next door, there's one over there that we think our technology could be applicable for, and we're being very thoughtful about how we approach those as well. But we're not doing ourselves any favor if we spread ourselves too thin and botch this first thing, right? So we got to get this right. We got to get it right for you guys. We got to get it right for us. We are able to take on some more, but we have to first focus and make sure we get this right.
Great. Well, here's to many more conversations and close working relationship. And I do encourage the families in the room and researchers too. If you don't know the CAMP4 team, they're great people and we've really enjoyed working with them. So this is a fabulous way to end the day. As soon as we do this next thing, everybody who wants to can come up here for a picture, and then the drinks are outside. And the last thing I wanted to say is please join me in thanking Josh and the CAMP4 team for their incredible work.
Thanks a lot, Mike.